Hey Grove Group leaders, welcome to week 5. We're going to be looking at Matthew 18:21 to 35. The big idea of the passage is the children of the kingdom have received life-transforming forgiveness, and the Messiah calls us to be transformed as forgivers. Again, it's worth pointing out that this fits in a bigger section that I've reminded us of the last couple of weeks about what true greatness is like, and Jesus has flipped that question on its head to show us how he interprets greatness. It's humility, it's valuing what he values, it's valuing his people, it's seeing the seriousness of sin, it's being aware of what's going on for each other. And today it's being aware of the need for forgiveness from those who have been forgiven so much. There's something about the Messiah's forgiveness that he's going to bring in the future for the people he's talking to in this passage, but we know that forgiveness, that they were still kind of working out what it was going to be like. We get the benefit of living this side of the cross and the resurrection, and so Jesus expects the forgiveness we receive to be life transforming, because it is. So the introduction question there, two kind of options. You might think it's worthwhile to do some context by reflecting on the sermon on the weekend and bringing up some of those ideas we've been discussing. The other idea there is just to talk about two things: what's hard about forgiveness, or what's good about forgiveness. And what's good about forgiveness? Ask both those questions. Potentially this is a hard point for lots of people given what's going on in their lives, and so even as we want to help people go on the journey of forgiveness, knowing that it is a journey and people could be at different points in your groups, being aware of that could be helpful. And so maybe go to the previous question if coming up with the word is going to trigger things that's potentially unhelpful for people. Because forgiveness looks different in different situations, but depending what's going on. And so, we want to come to this study too, recognising that about forgiveness, that it can be a journey and that it can look different in different situations. It doesn't mean that you become best friends again. It doesn't mean you enter back into relationships that have been broken because of what's happened. There's lots of things to consider in that. But the command to forgive, however that looks and whatever that looks like with where we're up to, is crucial for Christians. So, but we just want to be aware of that complexity and not try and answer that complexity for them in the Bible. We just want to highlight how good God's forgiveness is in this part of the Bible. So, question 1 there, got an idea for you. There's 2 options, but I reckon it could be fun to do the first one. I reckon have a crack. Have a go at drawing the first servant and try and represent his character in the drawing, and go around, give everyone a few minutes to draw the picture, get everyone to explain what they've drawn and reflect his character, and that'll bring up some of our feeling about what he's like and what we think of him. If you really don't want to do that, or you think it might fail in your group, you could have a go at what's your reaction to the first servant. So 2 things are just trying to get us to respond to the servant, and whether you draw about him or reflect on those verses, you'll get a reaction to what he's like because of how he's portrayed. In Matthew wants us to react. Jesus wants us to react from his story. And so what is it about them that makes it react that way? Or why do you think Jesus paints the servant like this? Why does he bother doing that? Question 2, how would you put the point of the parable in a sentence? Worth just throwing around. It's a pretty simple message that the first servant's not the kind of guy that you like, because he's been forgiven so much, and yet he doesn't forgive. The last verse of the passage is pretty helpful to summarise the point too. Question 3, what does this passage help us see about ourselves? We're like the first servant. We've been forgiven much, and we needed that forgiveness desperately. We're completely at the mercy of the Master, and so that helps us see ourselves and how we view ourselves. And so you might want to throw that around in a little bit more detail too. So it shows us our need for forgiveness. It shows us that we're not better than others. It shows us that we desperately need mercy, and it shows us that we're crazy not to forgive, however that looks and whatever we're up to in that stage as well. So question 4, what does this passage help us see about God? So looking particularly at the master's character, there's a warning there and a comfort. The warning is that he takes his command seriously, he takes how we live seriously. If we are to know the forgiveness he offers and live out of line with it, that's a serious problem. And without forgiveness, we live in debt. We live in eternal debt that we can never pay off. And so there's a warning there for us about the seriousness of sin and his glory and our failure. But there's comfort there that he's a forgiving God, that he loves to show mercy. As we saw in Isaiah last year, it's his alien work to judge. He longs to show mercy. And so that's helpful in showing us about God there. Question 5, why is forgiveness necessary for children of the kingdom? So it's necessary because we've been forgiven. And so the next question, what might it look like for forgiveness to not come from the heart? Because the call is that we forgive people from the heart. What does that mean? As we kind of reflect on the rest of the Bible as well, that on the teaching of the heart, it is, you might have heard something of this before, but the heart is the kind of the center of who we are. And so from deep within us, we forgive, however that looks. Because there's different appropriate forms for different situations. So, but it comes from it's a genuine forgiveness. It's not a ingenuine thing. So how might forgiveness have various shapes yet still be genuine? And that's to just help us be aware that different kind of forgiveness looks different. Potentially, younger people in the group or something like that, if running a study at night, or for younger people, maybe we haven't been wronged as significantly as others, but that's definitely don't want to make that generalisation either. I think it doesn't take long in life to know the need of forgiveness that we have ourselves for that need because of how we've wronged people and how we've wronged God, but how we need to give that to other people, forgive others as well. And so it does have various shapes. There's significant boundaries that potentially still need to be put in place. Relationships maybe the consequence is that they necessarily can't be what they used to be because of what's happened. Lots of different examples of that. But how even in those various forms, particularly like maybe the stricter forms of forgiveness where there are significant boundaries, how can that still be genuine? It's a helpful one to throw around and think about that together, because it'll help land what forgiveness looks like in our lives and help us see, okay, how do I apply this command to my situation? And so you might want to come back to that as well at the end of the study if you did want to pray in pairs and spend a little bit of time thinking about, okay, what does that look like for me? It could be something you come back to and share in smaller groups, or if you're in a mixed group, if you split guys and girls or something like that, that could be something to come back through at that point. The next question there, how does this passage help you reflect on the greatness of being in the kingdom? Lots of things that are great about being in the kingdom. We have peace with this master. We don't deserve that peace. We're completely at his mercy, but we have peace with him. And we've joined peaceful relationship with him, but it's freed us to live in peaceful relationship with others. We don't have to hold on to the bitterness of forgiveness, which is really to live in slavery to it, where we can't forgive and let go and move forward. We actually have the power to forgive because we've seen how beautiful it is, how good it is, yet hard as well. So next question under that, as we finish this chapter in Matthew that started with a question, who is the greatest? How has Jesus turned this question on its head? He's shown that greatness is completely different to what we think. It's not about trying to be the master like potentially we thought. It's not about trying to be the opposite of a child who's humble. It's not about being individually focused. It's about coming into right relationship with God, joining his kingdom. That's the key thing. As a child, humbly dependent on him. And so knowing that we're that child to care for the community that we now belong to as God's people, to care for the rest of the flock, and also to forgive, knowing how much we've been forgiven. And so the little question off that, why do humility and forgiveness go hand in hand? Well, as I humble myself to see how undeserving I am, it helps me appreciate the forgiveness I've been shown, and so I can forgive others. It says too that I'm humble enough to see that what you've done to me is that the sin that drove that is the sin that lives in me. My sin might look different, and I might have been able to mask it better than them, potentially. But the sin that lives in them lives in me, and they need forgiveness like I do. The next question, what difference would it make if church was a community of forgivers? It would be it'd be great, wouldn't it? It would be a beautiful thing, that the tensions that exist and the any kind of enmity or anything like that could be resolved if we just forgave people. And then what might be our part to play in this kind of community? So it's easy to go, oh, what could church be like? But we are that church, each individual. So what's our part to play in that? And that's a helpful principle to just stop and reflect on as well, that as we talk about what church is, what we bring to that matters. There's a couple of other little questions there about to help us reflect on this, Jesus' teaching here and the example he gives, but also how that helps us praise him. And so that's a good spot to end in that study. Have a great week. I'll see you next week.